G'day guys, you're listening to the AussieDevs podcast, episode 8. Something a little bit different today. I am here by myself and not joined by Eric, as I'm currently touring New Zealand with my lovely wife, and I've taken the time to stop and catch up with the guys from Dinosaur Polo Club. So we're here with Peter and Robert Carrier and Navi
Brower.
It's
okay.
I was like, I didn't know if it was Navi or like Navi or Navy or...
Not Navy, but Navi or Navi or whatever,
Yeah.
It's all fine, yeah.
The guys from Dinosaur Polo Club, who have released the game Mini Metro for PC and mobile devices. So thanks for taking the time to chat to me today, guys.
No problem.
Really appreciate it.
A pleasure.
You guys, like I just said before, released a game Mini Metro to pretty much critical acclaim. It's... I must say that I only downloaded it probably the end of last year and played it for the first time, considering it's been out since 14?
You could have played it in 2013 in theory.
So you released it on Steam first?
Steam Early Access. Would you like the whole history? It's a long and convoluted history. So it was originally a Game Jam game in May 2013. And then we decided to turn that into a full-blown commercial release, and then working on that part-time. Then we released on Steam Greenlight. Yes. So we had so it was playable on the web the whole time ever since we released the game.
The game, like as per game.
We released we put it up on Steam Greenlight in March 2014, and then had a early access release in August 2014. Yeah, and then released out of early access November 2015. And then made the iOS and Android release October 2016.
Yeah. So and then here we are.
And then here we are.
And so most people would have heard of Mini Metro by now, even if it's like me who very late in the piece. But nominated for lots of awards and things like that. And I probably feel a little bit uncomfortable sometimes accepting a bit of praise about it, or
we are very much New Zealanders, so yes, we don't like being told that a thing we did is alright.
Yeah. Oh, it's not that good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's alright, I suppose, but yeah.
I must say it's highly addictive. Like that's probably the biggest thing for me is that like you start playing, you go, I don't really get what the fuss is about. I was like, this is alright. Oh, you son of a... wow, I need more trains, I need more tunnels.
Yeah, that's probably the thing we hear the most, is how it just sort of... I think it can be quite mesmerising. So once you start, it's just interesting to kind of watch it work, and then people just don't like to stop watching it. So
I mean, like I've read a few interviews and things you guys did, and you were sort of saying the main things you were playing to your strengths when you were creating that game, and as both being programmers... primarily with not a lot of art skills, paraphrasing here, the simplistic or like dialed down art style I think really speaks to me as well. The few mobile games that we have sort of played and we've talked about at our shows, the art style's kind of been the key thing for us that has kind of captured us a little bit. Like, it's not easy to make a beautiful visual game necessarily on mobile device. Without sort of chewing through the power of it or anything like that. It's a lot of sort of abstract ideas are out there as how visually a game should look or how they wanted a game to look. And I think that really works well. Like, it's simple, but it's not boring.
Yeah.
Simple is probably not the right word. Like, it's dialed down, but the use of the colour palette and things like that, yeah.
When it came to the art style, that was... very much a conscious choice. As you said, we were thinking of what things we could do in an abstract style, because that's what we were capable of executing well. And then the subway metaphor was just something that came out of that, because obviously we were just influenced by an existing abstract thing that already exists in the real world, and adapting that to an interactive form. So that really was the function following the form, I guess, in a way. We didn't set out to make a game about trains. We set out to make a game in an abstract art style, and it just so happened that there was a good game with subway trains in there that was asked
Yeah,
to be.
Yeah, I guess that there was an abstract art style there that we could sort of not left, but sort of borrow elements from. Yeah.
And you can see it, like, you know, like you sit down on a train pretty much anywhere, and you've got that. That's how they demonstrate stations, and it's similar. Like it's, you know, a similar representation.
So it's a thing that a lot of people just get straight away. They just kind of see the way the game looks, and then they just have a pretty good idea about what it is and what it's about.
Generally, it's fairly accurate, we think.
Yeah, I mean, not everyone sort of gets straight away, but they are at least interested enough, and that they know that what it is, that they'll sort of spend a bit of time to see how it works. Yeah.
I think I read an interview you guys were in, and it was around, like, someone had commented that now they understand why it's so hard to create, like, municipal transport and things like that. You know?
That's the thing we've heard a fair bit, actually, and it's really cool to know that just a game that we did for, you know, just for people to have fun with, has actually led people sort of think more deeply about this. It's really, that was a very unexpected side effect, but very, very, very cool.
Well, I mean, steering away a little bit, we'll come back to Mini Metro a bit later on, but I kind of want to get a bit of a feel for yourselves and how you guys all sort of got into the industry. And I suppose the one question I sort of like to ask is, what's the first game that you can remember playing that, like, left an imprint on you?
Oh my goodness. It would have been something, because our granddad was really into computers.
Yeah.
And he had a 286, I think, was the...
So it probably would have been Prince of Persia. Because I remember we went to this, like, the only... That was, like, the best thing about going to seeing Granddad, was that we got to play that on his computer. And Prince of Persia back in the day,
Spike traps and the...
It's just the animation, and the animation was just spectacular.
Like 1990, 1989 or something?
It would have.
I have no idea.
I don't know when it was released actually, but it would have been like 80s, early 90s, probably early 90s, because I think we got our first computer in 92. 93, yeah. So it was a few years before then.
This was a fairly fundamental.
yeah.
I think in our childhood, this is when we stopped going over to the next door.
Once,
hang out and
just friends with them, just so you could play with.
over the computer after that.
So I would probably say Prince of Persia, but I mean other games.
There were a whole bunch of. He had a subscription to Softdisk or something, which was I don't know if you.
You got the subscription,
and then
3.5 inches.
The senior 3.5 inch floppy with a whole bunch of shareware and stuff.
And we had those.
He had a whole bunch.
There was id Software's game Catacomb Abyss that they did before Wolfenstein. I think they were involved in it, but I don't know if they actually released it under the name.
I think there's that little ASCII RPG thing that we used to play.
I think it was just called D&D. I remember I had to ask what desiccate meant, because you could...
You learned so many random words. Because
I think there was a vampire that could desiccate you, and I didn't know what that meant.
Like,
I just knew that
must be bad.
I just knew that you could buy...
if a vampire can do it to the problem.
I remember you could buy desiccated coconut. That's all that I did. So I was like, so what is the relation between what the vampire is doing to me and a coconut? It's
a tropical vampire.
So he just turns me into little white chips.
And then Mum puts you in a cake? I don't know.
I mean, but then there was other stuff, like Doom was just...
Doom was one. I mean, we had
complete revelation.
We had to con the folks into buying
like a too graphic
upgrade. Sorry, because we had to get 4 megs of RAM for that, so we had to get them to upgrade that, so we could play Doom.
That would have been like a huge outlay then as well.
It would have been.
2 was a huge thing as well, I remember.
Civilization, of course.
Did you ever play Ultima Underworld?
I never played Ultima.
The Stygian Abyss. That was my jam when I was younger. And that was one of the first, first-person RPG type games as well. Kind of paved the way with that view.
Yes. So that's us.
I was just saying. Yeah.
I didn't grow up with these two, so that's a little different. It was funny because I was thinking about this a while ago. I'm like, I wasn't as much of a gamer when I was a kid because I didn't really sort of embrace a whole lot of it until I was in my 20s because of reasons. But I sort of thought back to it and I realized that I actually was playing like Super Nintendo. I was playing like Mario when I was like knee-high to a tadpole. Like, I remember going to my friend's place and they had a console and we were playing with it and like playing Duck Hunt a bunch. And we had a Commodore 64 when I was a kid, so I was playing like Space Invaders and Pitfall and like some silly like basketball game where you were basketball and you had to try and sink yourself into each other called like Mike and Ike or something like that. Like, there was a bunch of like really crap games, but like Q*bert was on there and stuff like that. So like we had a whole bunch of don't
hit the microphone. Sorry.
But we had, no, it's okay. We had, like, I actually grew up with games a whole bunch just over life. Like, I used to go to my friend's place and we'd play, like, Lion King and Donkey Kong Country and, like, all of these kind of games, and it just sort of built up over time. And so when people are like, oh, I played this thing, I'm like, I can remember doing that.
Yeah.
It was great. That was super cool.
And that's the thing with, like, our generation as well now. You always had, like, a friend who had something. I was never the guy with the console. Mum and Dad like never. No, go outside and play. You're like, yeah, righto. And then you go to your mate's place and like, you've got like a NES. Oh my god. Let's play Golden Axe. No, that was on Sega. Sorry.
We always said we had friends with consoles.
Yeah, exactly.
You
were the PC kid.
We got a Game Boy when I was 11, and I was so over the moon over that. Like, we always had a computer, and like, I was a master of SimCity 3000. I was good with Archons. It was amazing. But like, we never managed to have a console until my brother actually like saved up all of his pennies and I think he bought an Xbox when they first came out.
Yeah.
And so I think he was bombing around with like Ghost Recon. No, was it Ghost Recon? No. I know GoldenEye was definitely something that he was just like super into for ages. Because of hockey reasons, because I'm Canadian, of course that's the reason.
Yeah.
But he ended
That's
up,
all you guys do, right?
Yeah, no, seriously. But he was sort of in and out of the house, and so he'd bring his console with him, which is smart. So we'd only have it like in the house for a little while. So I think I got my first one secondhand, and it was a PS2. And that was sort of when I was actually starting to get really into games, and when I got a proper computer and all that kind of stuff. So
I've just built a new computer.
It's the greatest, isn't it?
So exciting.
And like you start, but you're like, you know what? I might just like you might as well get the better version of this. Like, I might as well get like a 1070 graphics card, and I was like, do I need a 1080?
Yes.
And then I was like,
the answer is
I don't think I can afford that.
But I'll be saving money buying it now because it'll be, I'll have to upgrade it, further in the future. Yeah, so it's the sensible decision.
Yeah. This is just like, that's okay. So, I mean, continuing with that sort of theme is, how did you guys get into game dev? Like, what, all of you, is it a conscious choice?
We've got a
or
really
kind of
boring story. You've got a much more interesting story.
Yeah.
Just went to uni and then...
Yeah, I think because I was talking about this last night actually. I don't ever remember having a serious career thought other than game development. Like other than the firefighter, astronaut, blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. And it's been a really, I guess, as a straight white guy, right? It's pretty easy to fault. Thing just went to university. We played around a bit in a spare time with game development, but didn't get very far. Then went to university, did comp sci, got a job at a studio around here, worked there 4.5 years, then went indie, and other than a stint when that first indie experience didn't go quite as successfully as this one, doing web development and more sort of generic IT stuff, and came back into this in 2013, and that's been my career trajectory. It's pretty straightforward.
Same story, I suppose.
Basically the same with a few more hiccups, I suppose, but about the same. Yeah. I mean, I originally went to university to do marketing or something.
That sounds boring.
And then I switched from that to doing Latin, and I did that anyway, but then also did computer science on the side, which I was quite thankful for, because that's what actually has given me a job.
Arts degree.
And then just sort of went out of games, sort of web dev, and then went back into games. So
No, that's cool.
My story's a little bit more complicated. When I got out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and sort of messed about a little bit in university for a bit, and then sort of settled on going into teaching, because I had been I used to figure skate when I was a kid, and so I used to teach a whole bunch, and it sort of seemed like a good path to go on. So I got an arts degree, and it actually was useful because it was the step into my teaching degree. So
straight out.
Exactly. So because the way the Canadian system is, it made sense. And so I ended up teaching for 6 or so years in Vancouver, and then ended up with a partner who was in game development, and he whisked me away from Vancouver to Toronto. And then once I got to Toronto, I was trying to find a job as a teacher, and it was almost impossible because their system is very closed, and there's basically, in any major city center, there's just way more people that have teaching degrees than they have spots for teachers. And so trying to get a job was pretty much impossible, and I spent a year trying to figure out what I was going to do and dealing with a concussion, which was lots of fun. And when I came out the other side of that, all of a sudden we were also moving to New Zealand. So I was like, all right, here we go. I can try doing this teaching thing again, and it'll be great. And I got here and found some more hiccups in the way, and sort of had to sit down and think about, okay, so like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, if we move again, I'm going to have some more issues with teaching. If we go to a place that doesn't have English as a first language, now I've got even less resources behind me. And when you're a teacher, you kind of need to stay rooted. And I was sort of looking around, and after like the 3 years that I had of sort of being surrounded by game development, because when I moved to Toronto, that's what I got to, those are who I got to hang out with, was the lovely community in Toronto. And I was sort of like, hey, maybe I can do this thing. This would be really cool. And with all of the sort of leadership stuff that I've got and all of the, in basically a classroom, you're a producer for a bunch of tiny humans, right? Like that are sometimes less and sometimes more easy to deal with than adults. And so I was like, well, if I can handle 30 children, hopefully I can handle a team of like 7 or 8 devs. And so.
And then you couldn't.
Yeah. Well, so far 2 is doing okay. We're doing all right.
Only a few tantrums.
Yeah, well, you never know. And then I actually ended up talking to Mario, who is basically owns Pickpock, and he was a good friend of my partner. And yeah, I was sort of like, okay, so like, what do I need to do in order to get to games? And so he was like, well, a good place to start is QA. So I did a year at QA, doing QA at Pickpock, which was really awesome and sort of taught me generally, it got me to be able to see sort of the flow of how things go and stuff like that. And I started sort of making my edges way around learning production, and then these guys put up a job posting, and I was like, hey, I think I can do most of those things. Yeah. And here I am, which is amazing. So I had this really roundabout sort of adventure actually getting into games. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's probably more your sort of, the way you got into games is probably more how people are doing it now, who are, like the younger generation is probably going the same route as you guys in terms of going to university and stuff like that, but the people who are a little bit older who now all of a sudden go, actually, I've enjoyed playing games for a long time. I've started to learn how to do some dev stuff, like create some things. I can do this as a job, or can make that transition.
Well, and it's interesting because I mean, I'm surrounded by a whole bunch of people who have sort of gotten into it in a different way. Like if you're doing art stuff, if you're doing programming stuff, those ones are a lot harder because you actually need that experience, you need that time, like, getting to know your craft essentially. Yeah. But there's so many other places that are in game development that actually use a bunch of these different kinds of soft skills that you actually develop in different places. Like the number of producers I've met who never started in games and had no intention of starting in games has been incredible. Like most of them have come from completely other different backgrounds where they were in management positions, but that's where they kind of moved to. Or like people who are doing community stuff and are just jumping around, or like, there's so many other positions other than the ones that you kind of think of. And like QA is technically a good place to start. It's got a little bit of an interesting rap that depending on where you are, which is thankfully sort of making the shift towards improving, especially in like indie studios or smaller studios. Like at Pickpock we had a group of, I think there was like 8 of us, and we were sort of the QA area, but we would go to scrums every day. We were involved with our teams. Like we were actually functional members as opposed to being like this little farm of people that they like put games into and then spit info back out
and all they do is criticize.
Well, that's what they hear, as well as they also don't end up getting respect. Like there's horror stories of like places like where they just like let go of swaths of people on a week's notice because they've got these big groups and it's like, oh, we don't have any work anymore, bye guys, and so there's no actual respect for the people working there, and it's seen as a low-level job because it's something that doesn't require huge amounts of, unless you're actually getting into the really technical QA, they don't actually, that you can get into it being somebody who doesn't have any sort of previous experience and stuff.
Yeah, but if you get a good
It's not
tested.
as
They
a
can,
profession.
yeah, but they can be amazing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
I mean, they obviously serve a purpose, right? The whole point.
They-
of
they-
it, like
They are the
quality
most
assurance, that's the
important
whole.
line of
They
defense
can-
before,
yeah, they can.
I mean, unless you're like Fallout, where you can get away with having a million bugs in your
You
game.
just release and go, you guys fix it.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
community, you guys
Yeah.
just fix it.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it is, I don't like the way that QA is often seen as, you know, the easy way into the industry and stuff. Like it devalues QA as a profession.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it should be a
It's a
profession
skill.
by itself because it's
Yeah.
Because it is so, I mean, it's a hard job to do.
You've got to kind of like come into it thinking all different aspects. Like, because if you've got to come into thinking, okay, what if I was this? Put a different hat on each.
yeah.
You know, as you're QAing something, you've got to put different hats on.
Yeah.
To, you know, depending what your target audience is for the game that you're.
And you've got to like work with the developers or the artists or whoever you're trying to help to figure out exactly what information they need, what you know, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It is you really miss it when it's not there.
Yeah.
People don't like being told that something isn't
No,
good or not. You know, like.
Yeah.
and that's another problem as well. If it's not managed, if the relationship between QA and developers are not managed well, it can lead to a very antagonistic
It's got to be
relationship.
constructive. That's the whole point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
There's-
fantastic when it all flows well, but it's so easy to just go off the rails.
Yeah. There's a
Like,
huge.
haha, look at your stuff sucks. Like,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
is- it's broken.
Yeah.
I broke it.
Well, and there's a huge amount of like when we are writing tickets even, right? Like being able to make sure we've got all the info that's in there so that when they actually get around to it, they can actually understand what's going on. Because sometimes it's a smaller bug, then it's, you know, they don't get it until 2 months later and you don't remember, you're like 3 games past that already. Like and because we work on a whole bunch of different kind of titles and stuff like that. And so it's one of those things where you do have to learn sort of how to manage those kind of expectations. Like there's some where I could write like ridiculous things to my artist because it was a super blatant thing and we both thought it was hilarious and I knew I could have that relationship, but I knew that there are other people who wouldn't necessarily appreciate that because they think I would be poking fun as opposed to sort of seeing the humor in what's actually there. So yeah, it was neat.
I suppose coming back to Mini Metro, yeah, I suppose you're sort of involved in this question as well. It's a bit obvious at the moment, but how has it changed your life since the success of it?
It's funny because so when I first started wanting to get back into game development, so around early 2013, I was a stay-at-home father at that point, and I'd been out of the industry for quite a while, and all of a sudden sort of losing your professional identity as well, which happens when you become a star.
Yeah.
You start looking after the kids. I sort of thought, well, if I'm not making a game, if I haven't released a game in like 5 years, I can't seriously call myself a game developer anymore.
Yeah.
And it had been about that time since I'd released something. So I sort of like set up this goal for myself, I want to get a game released on Steam, independently developed, because I hadn't actually released anything as an independent dev ever.
Yeah.
What were the 3 goals I said? I wanted a game on Steam, and I wanted the little Humble icon, you know, the little icons that they make for Humble Bundle.
Yeah,
What's
yeah.
the third thing?
I love a Humble Bundle.
I think it was actually nomination for the IGF, I think, which I thought was like, there's no way I'm going to do that. But those were the 3 goals I set for myself. And now, and then, we did that. We made.
We don't have the humble icon.
Mini Metro.
I did
Failed.
ask for one. I did ask for one, but they were like, oh, let's see what we can do. But
yeah, and then I don't know. So it's kind of funny. Like you set these goals for yourself, which at the time that was quite an ambitious goal because that was also when Steam Greenlight was maybe just coming out or something. So getting on Steam was a bit like, ooh, how on earth is that going to happen? It seemed like it's insurmountable.
Like
goal.
millions of titles.
But now, and then that all just worked out well. We planned for the first time ever to actually to scope accurately and get a game done, and we managed to make a game for the first time that people like to play and release it on Steam, and
it kind of
actually won an IGF award, and haven't got that humble icon yet, but it'll come eventually, I'm sure. And then you sit back, and think about what's changed, and it's like still just just me,
Doing your
still
thing,
just us, so still just,
Yeah.
it can be kind of weird sometimes. You realise I've achieved the goal I set out to do and nothing's changed. Like, it's like, where's the magic fairy dust and
like
stuff,
the ticker tape parade.
Yeah.
It's interesting you said that, because that's kind of what I was thinking you were going to say. Like, not trying to preempt the question, but at the end of the day, you kind of transition from one job to another, in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, professionally, everything has completely changed, for sure. I mean, now the work that we do every day is so different. It's not at all what I expected, but it's very different from just, being sort of a person that wanted to become what we are now, of course. I mean, we work on the code all day, every day, and, fixing bugs and implementing features and stuff, and now, we're looking at hiring, we're looking at talking with partners and stuff, where arranging distribution agreements and answering loads of emails, tons of emails. So so in that sense, everything's changed.
Yes. So what you're doing has changed.
Yeah, and we're thinking more about what we're going to do in the future and how we're going to just sort of adapt
there.
The next game.
But
the next game.
But apart from that, it's all pretty much the same.
And then that's again the work you were doing has changed, and I mean, you weren't doing a whole lot of. Were you doing any game dev sort of on the side of your day job as well?
Yeah, a little bit. It was kind of Pete's passion. I was sort of happy doing web development. I found a good company to work for, and I was happy enough there. I went to Indicate though in 2000.
October 2014.
Yeah, and that was like, okay, right, I want to be getting blah. I mean, that was just an amazing experience. Just so many
California,
awesome people. Yeah, it's in LA. Yeah. It's we just got in. That was the first festival that accepted me.
That would have been amazing. That would have been so cool.
And we just met so many cool
It's the
people.
coolest festival. It's just it's amazing. It's really neat. It's like a polar opposite of like a E3 or anything. Not that I've been to E3 actually, but it's very dev focused, real, obviously indie.
Yeah.
It's a lot is about the love of the games and what games can do and how games can.
The power of games.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like it was weird actually being because I felt like we were one of the more commercially focused games there.
Yeah, righto.
Which is not something I've felt often.
It's all relative, right?
Yeah. Well, I think if you look at all the games that were in the Firehouse with us, we are the second most popular game after Keep Talking was there. The bomb disposal game. They've done a lot better than we have. I think on the same par, but And then when we were in the RGFs, we were the least the least successful game out of the top 6 there. Yeah. So I guess it's kind of interesting to compare those two to each other.
So I suppose changing the workflow each day. Obviously, how do you manage what has to be done each day? As we all turn and look at Debbie.
Well, it's been interesting because I showed up 3 months ago.
Yeah.
I've just jumped into this, and so a lot of it I've gone from QA to I thought my track to being a producer was going to be a little more slow. Eventually I would be an assistant producer at Picklock, and then I'd sort of grow my way up. It just got thrown into the deep end, and so part of it's just sort of been figuring out what works for all of us, and so. A little bit of experimentation. I mean, we tend to work with agile, sort of agile style with Scrum, but when I first showed up, everything was just kind of because they just finished doing their release, and all they were doing was emails for the first while, and I was sort of catching up and getting everything sorted, and so now we're starting to get back into a rhythm again as well. We have our scrums in the morning, we sort of figure out what we're going to do. We do our planning for our 2-week sprints and stuff like that. So we have, we try and a lot to make sure that we're going to actually get everything done, or at least most things done, and it's right now we're just sort of recalibrating again, partially because I'm here now, so I can sort of take some of the work that they normally would have to deal with off. I'm still having to slap them away when they keep trying to answer emails, and I'm I can do that. Go do the stuff I can't do. Just go. But it's been really neat. I think we're starting to hit our stride, which is really good. So.
Because we were working pretty well on just an ordinary dev kind of schedule from about May last year through to release in October, but since then it's just been manic. And it kind of feels that we're about to kind of get back into that sort of nice routine of just getting work done and
We've started doing things like blocking out points of time. So like before we have Scrum at like 10 o'clock, we have like this, all right, finish up the thing that you were like, have been thinking about all last night and now can actually sort of figure out. And then we try and keep, we know we work sort of on the tasks that we really have to get done really well in the morning. So like the next 2 hours is just like ignore everything else, ignore all the emails unless they're really, really, really bugging you or really important. And like you just spend that time, like for them, it's coding, designing, etc. For me, it's whatever. And then sort of from after that point, that's sort of when we can sort of break things down a little bit more, and you can sort of spend some more time doing all those extra bits that are sort of playing in your head. And trying to make time, it's funny because you always wanted like, oh, you're like, oh, an email popped up, I want to go and deal with that right now. It's like, no, that can wait, like go deal with this other thing first. So yeah, I think it's part of it's just psychologically remembering to actually, like, you have another job to do and you can do that and that's okay. Like, don't feel like you have to jump all over.
I think it's a lot more of a relaxed environment to work in as a game dev compared to say a strict, like I work in a mining company. You've got strict deadlines in terms of I have to be at this meeting at this time exactly every day. You know, I have to do this exact thing by this time, whereas it feels a lot more flexible. In terms of, I mean, obviously you guys set yourself your timeline, your schedule, because otherwise you'll probably never achieve anything. But, you know, it's probably a little bit more flexible in terms of when you exactly have to achieve certain things by.
I think the difference is that we don't, you know, we have like a few 100,000 bosses.
Yeah.
But we don't report them directly, so I suppose it does.
You're kind of your own boss in terms.
Yeah, but then that's also dangerous because you know, as you said, you can be like, I've got weeks to do that. I don't have to get it done.
Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Yeah. So I guess we do have to be a bit more diligent, I guess, and you know, just making sure that we do stick to a deadline.
Well, we've started, I think, community external deadlines.
Yes, yeah. Which is good because when you've said to somebody else that we're going to get a thing done, that's a very good motivator to get that thing done.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you don't want to let these people down.
No.
So, yeah.
And then, especially sort of just emerging out of, I suppose, the lower end of the indie dev scene to sort of breaking out a bit more. You know, you want to put your best foot forward in terms of
Yes.
Of, you know, there kind of is that stigma around indie games.
We've heard this.
Like, you know, like in terms of they're just indie, like it's just an indie team type thing or something like that. I don't know whether you guys feel that, but
Right, yeah.
Outsiders looking in, which go, it's just an indie. I mean, it's becoming a lot more mainstream indie, or it is a lot more mainstream, but compared to the AAA title things, you know, even though, that's a different. Yep.
No, I know what you mean, and we've always tried to be professional. We don't always succeed.
Or not implying that you're not.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
No. I just mean, I know exactly what you mean. I know there is that indie stigma. It's still a bad word to some people. Like I said, we try. We don't always succeed. I mean, we've shipped releases that we shouldn't have shipped, and we've and picked things up, and customers have picked things up that we should have picked up before we pushed the button, and that kind of thing. And one of the things we are trying to do is to become more professional, which is why the first role we filled was producer, not just another role, to get through stuff. But it is a good look, I think, if you are professional, obviously. Cause,
I mean,
you're a business at the end of the day. You're trying to make a product that, if you look at it in the most commercial terms, you're making a product. You want people to buy the thing you want to sell. I mean, that you're trying to sell, and just like any business, if you look professional, then people will give you the benefit of the doubt.
One of our sort of favourite phrases at the moment is minimum viable product. I think it's probably is across the board. Like, if you're so emotionally invested in something, I think it's probably more relevant to people who are, deving as a hobby or as trying to break out. If you're so emotionally invested in something, you're not going to think of it as a business, really. Whereas at the end of the day, if your end goal is just to produce a game that you've poured your heart and soul into or whatever, and you're not hugely fast, it's going to be a commercial success, then that's great. And there are people out there definitely who are doing it, and you shouldn't be doing game dev just to make money. Like
No,
I feel.
I think that's the
Yeah.
worst. There are way easier
Yes,
ways to
to
get
make
rich.
money. Yeah,
than-
you can get way richer probably.
Oh yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you want to do it as a business and you want to be commercially viable in doing it, you've probably got to make some sacrifices in terms of making a game that you can then sell to give you more revenue to then create either better or something else.
Yeah, you do really need to factor in what you want to get out of doing game development. To alter your approach about how you're going to develop games. Yeah, because you do, if you do want to make more games professionally and not as a hobby, then you do need to make sure you kind of factor in that.
But it's such a tricky topic because as soon as you start thinking about it just as a business, then it's got like you might as well just forget about it and do something else. But so
Make a slot game.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But then you can't pursue it purely artistically and be surprised when it's not a commercial success or not commercially viable. So you've got to try to keep the sort of artistic integrity or whatever, but still keep commercial concerns like in mind, right? You're making sure that there is actually a target audience that's big enough to play it. There's you're giving people a reason to buy the game.
Well, there's that whole thing like that. Games I want to make, games I'm good at making, games I can sell, and like you have to find a thing
like
that
a Venn diagram.
Yeah, exactly right. And there's a very small bit right in the middle, and that's where you have to be.
Yeah, and as soon as you start, I mean, it's just like anything. As soon as you start doing anything commercially and trying to get a living wage out of it, it cuts back your options drastically on what you can do. And it's the same with if you bake or, there's a big difference between someone who likes to bake and then actually opening a bakery and running it as a business, as an enterprise.
Exactly. And again, it comes back to, like I think we spoke about before, if you're so emotionally invested in something, it's hard to maybe see that. Because, I mean, if you're creating something, so you're going to have to be invested in it. Emotionally, and that's when it's going to be hard to go, potentially.
Yeah, actually we can't afford to add this thing or
And
because when we first came up with the Game Jam and just worked on it on a weekend and came up with this thing that people like to play, and then we realised that there was probably some commercial something in there that we could turn into a commercial game. We were coming from a position of anonymity and we didn't have anything to lose. We weren't trying to make a commercial release.
We didn't have any expectations.
We hadn't sort of come up with a game pitch, got a team together, pitched to a VC funder or a publisher, got funding, and then tried to build it. So we've never done that. We've never built a game from scratch thinking about it as a commercial endeavour.
I mean, how did you end up marketing this then? Did it kind of market itself?
Yes. Was the short answer.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of the...
I think that is giving us a less than you... Because Pete's... So we kind of based it off the same way that the game Papers, Please was told, which was kind of... It was out of the Game Jam, and it was always up on the web the whole time. So Pete always thought that we should have the game always up on the web completely for free, which it is right.
Well,
as well.
If
well,
you
I mean, when I
say
then you can at least see what the game is and kind of experience it a bit. So, and that I think was probably the thing which gave us the most exposure. Because it was kind of an interesting looking game. So people, if they wanted to see what it was about, they could kind of instantly have an experience of it. But besides that, we didn't really do anything.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gained its own momentum a little bit.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, when we put it up on Greenlight about a week into that, the campaign, as they say, that was when it started getting mainstream press coverage. I don't know. No idea. It's not like we emailed random journalists. I wasn't bright enough to do stuff like that. And that was I think when having it played on the web really helped.
Yeah.
And that's
Because then they could play it.
people could instantly play it, and it's such a relatively intuitive and quick game that it's the sort of game you'll play for 5 minutes and you'll lunch break, and then we had people emailing their friends about it and posting it on Facebook and online, and then the amount of people playing it on that website went up from about 5 a day to about 35 to 40,000 a day at peak. It was crazy, and we just shot through the Steam.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, they're not great.
Oh yes, that's right. We had to actually set up a DDN to host the track.
Yeah, because it was just getting
I
way
had
too
to
much.
furiously set that up when I realised how much we were being swamped.
Well, and I mean, I think there was a little bit of forethought into it as well too, because I mean, you've got GIFs, right? Like people can make a GIF of the game they're playing, and then they can share that.
We did add that in quite late, though.
Oh, did you?
But yeah, I mean, you do want to add in all those kind of things, yeah, for sure.
Still getting a fair few purchases now of the game on Steam and on mobile devices. It's still like continuing. Like it's probably dropped off a little bit since the peak, maybe. But
it does, it does for sure. But we've been really surprised by how
longevity,
how it's held up. Yeah,
we've never not operated at a profit since the early access release. So even in
it's a win.
October August 2014. Yeah, so it's even at the low months between the peaks, between the featuring and the Steam sales, and always managed to make profit, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
not always a common,
not at all expecting. Same to Rob last week, I still remember walking home when I was visiting your place with Holness, and we were brainstorming ideas of what to make, and then you were like, oh, we could do like a train map thing, and I guess you could build this, and then I remember walking back and thinking like, oh, maybe it could work, maybe a train map thing could work. Here we are, 3.5 years later, or whatever it is, still making.
Well, but that's the other thing as well. Like people might assume that it's easy and you've just done this game and then that's it and you've released it and now you're like rolling in money, But the thing is, it's been in 2013 is when you sort of did the game jam, Other Than Dead game jam, and then it's 2017 now, and you guys are still working hard at like refining it and perfecting it and updates.
Yeah, it's funny. I think
bug fixes.
I think we got asked a lot last year. Was like, well, what's next?
Yeah.
What are you working on now? It's like we're working on Mini Metro. It's like we're still working on it. We are now beginning to work on other things, but still we spend 80 to 90% of our time still on Mini Metro.
And I think there's that lack of understanding as well, like especially from the big mobile user base, as to like it's easy, just make a game and then release it, and then you just play it and you guys get money. Everyone can do it.
What I find the key misunderstandings, I think, is actually the hardcore PC audience is the one that tends to misrepresent, or they have this other understanding of how easy it is to make games, and they're the ones that are often like, how can it cost that much? Like, how can it be? It'll take a week to add multiplayer. Thing, right? And I think from the free-to-play audience, from the mobile audience, is the lack of understanding of how big the industry is and how much cash there is in it.
Yeah.
Friends and family of mine who are more into free-to-play and that side of the mobile market, when I was trying to explain to them how that Supercell make $1 million a day on the games, and this was back when that was the number. I think it's now like 6 or 8 million a day or something. And she was just like, my sister-in-law was just like, there's no way that's true.
No, it's a fact.
Because I guess she's like, I watch like a few ads a day. How can that possibly?
Yeah. Or not understanding how and she will spend in these games. She doesn't like.
She's one of those.
She was.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
And when we were discussing, because we were discussing the games she plays and stuff, and she wanted me to not tell her husband that she spends X amount. It's like
yeah.
And it's like, do you know the thing? Like, you're not the only person in the world that buys these things. In these games, and you add it all up, it's a lot of freaking money.
They make it attractive, right? Like it's like, oh, it's only like a couple of dollars. Like what's a couple of bucks? You get all this stuff. I would much like, not just saying it because you guys have done it, but I'd much rather purchase a game like on my iPad. I've got a couple of free to play. Don't look at them. I've got a Pokemon card game. Sorry, I should. KOTOR and XCOM and like the Halo Spartan. I do have some of these, but I'd much rather pay the $13 or whatever it is for a game where I can just play it on the plane and not have to be connected to the internet and not get bombarded and pay money. But that's my personal preference, like different people.
Yeah, it is good that that industry is there, that it's a viable thing still to release. It's premium. I don't know how sensible it is.
No.
I don't know how lucky we were. I think it helped, and again, we only have our one game to go off. We don't have like this huge depth of experience but I think it helped the fact that we had established a name on PC before we hit iPhone.
Yeah.
iPhone and iPad. But again, I have no idea. Really, this is just
yeah, and I think Apple did help us a lot.
Oh yeah, for
they've
sure. Apple backed
been
us
very supportive.
About as well as we could ever have expected.
I mean, the App Store is pretty good. Yep.
It's good. It's good for us too.
Sorry, back to Steam Greenlight.
Yeah.
Do you guys know about the changes? Like do you have an opinion on it?
Yeah.
Or
I really haven't had much of a chance to really think about it.
yeah.
It's very difficult to think about it objectively from our position as well. Like, especially because even if it was this $5,000 access fee, which I know, I know that's the thing, right? They say that a range, and everyone just focuses on that high.
I think they say
100 to 5,000.
And now everyone's just talking
but
about
even
the
if it was
fee.
5,000 for a Western developer, it's not insurmountable, right? Like you could probably, hopefully, find that much if you wanted to put something on. It's still a big impediment to people in developing countries. I mean, it's just like there's no way. It's just absurd. If you have a bad exchange rate with the US or you're in a low wage
that's Southeast Asia.
That's just gone. Like you will just not end up with things.
So in one respect, it seems like it's a way of Valve to sort of self-police it, but without thinking about the big ramifications of it. It could have a pretty bad effect on.
I mean, $100 is what the fee is at the moment. Anyway, it is $100 to get onto Steam.
That's what no one's talking about then. Like no one's even mentioned.
I'm not saying that's
okay. No. I'm just like going through that. Everyone's like, oh, it's going to be so expensive. But that's just one-off fee though, isn't it? Like not per title.
I don't know. We've only launched one.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
No idea.
But yeah, I just didn't know. Like, obviously you guys.
And, I mean, the prospect of going on Steam Greenlight when we were doing it in March 2014 was absolutely horrendous. Like, it was horrific. Just contemplating how am I going to get 25,000? Because we talked to other devs that had gone through and they said you need around about 20 to 25,000 people who hit the yes. You get around about a 50% success rate. So you need around to drive about 50,000 people who are logged into Steam onto your page.
And there's
to
how many
vote.
other competing.
How on earth am I going to do that? But it's actually a really useful experience as a developer, especially as someone who has never sold a game before.
Because if you can't get that many people looking at your game in the first place, it's not going to do well once it hits Steam.
Yeah, exactly.
So it is a good early indicator of success.
And it's just, it gives you practice because you've got to write the pitch, you've got to come up with screenshots, the video, this and you have to do that a lot as to get people.
So it's almost like it's a sort of first run to give you
to
sort of
like
say
first marketing.
Yeah, exactly. If you can't sell this well, then you're Steam. But then that's the thing, right? Not every game is up on Steam to sell. And do we want to make Steam only for commercial games?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, is what Valve wants. I mean, Valve is very much we want to put games on here that people want to buy.
So it's good that I guess itch is now there as a viable market for not commercial games. But it's like, I don't know. I guess Valve owns Steam, so what they want Steam to become, that's completely.
And it's not up to us at all.
But I mean, as one of 100 million or whatever it is, like it's almost like we don't really get its say in what Steam is, even though the Steam audience is huge.
Well, does George Lucas get to decide what Star Wars is, or do we get to decide what Star Wars is? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's the same thing, isn't it? So, right.
And it's the thing that's sort of shocking about it is because you feel like you've got so much control over it, and all of a sudden that's being taken away, right?
Yeah,
and so you're just like, all of a sudden, I don't have this thing that was sort of like this guaranteed, okay, at least I have a shot, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I've got this learning experience, and I've got technically a little bit of this marketing for free almost, because I've gotten to be able to sort of put this out in
It
front
does
of
have
people.
that, yeah.
And so it's got a lot of, I think it's got a lot more implications for indies and for like a lot of the early first game businesses, because I mean, there's most indie development teams come from either like you got really lucky, you made a really good like game jam game, or you've been working on this demo in your spare time for however many long, and then maybe a publisher has decided they like you, or maybe somebody who in your family like has gotten an inheritance and decided to give it to you. But like it's not like we've got a system where you can set up a business and actually have like this flow of income that hasn't been like scrimped and scraped and whatever, unless you are signing half of your company away, right? Like there's nothing that's been quite set up yet, with the exception of a couple of very few places. Like you've got a system in Finland and you've got a system in Montreal where they actually have something that you can sort of be like, this is my game, this is what we're going to do, here's my business plan, and they'll actually give you some of the funding for it. You have to come up with some of it on your own, but at least it's a start. And we don't have, well, in New Zealand for sure, you used to have it in Australia, and it sounds like you took that away, and I'm so sorry.
No, you're right.
It broke all of our hearts. It was just like, oh God. But it was just, and that's the thing, right? Like, any other business that you have, you'll be able to go to a bank, you'll be able to go and get a loan in order to be able to start it when you've got all of your ducks in a row and stuff like that. Games, that just doesn't exist because we're so we're seen as so risk high, and there's nobody that really knows how to be able to assess that risk well, that's in a position to give you financial support.
Yeah.
So it's something that I think a lot of places are working on, but nobody's really managed to find the perfect example except Finland.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that as well, just the amount of privilege you need to actually be in a position to develop an indie game in the first place at the start. Like when I think about the amount of leeway that we were both given to fail and learn, because if you amortize the income that we've made on Mini Metro over all of the time that we were making other games and they didn't earn a dime, it's probably about an average wage. But we were given, we both have partners that were very accommodating.
And enough,
Supportive.
and easily enough.
Yeah,
for us to be able to just do whatever we
for a couple of years,
for a few years
after we left G Interactive, we were existing on pretty subsistence lifestyles for a few years, and not many people in the world have that opportunity.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and just all that kind of spare time, spare tech that you've got, like on a computer that you can use and that kind of stuff.
Well, especially coming from like a software company as well, where you kind of have all those resources and then going out on your own and having to do the set up, the initial outlay and things like that.
Yeah. When I first got here, when they had to set up the computer, and they're like, I miss having an IT person. We have to do all of this on day one. Okay, here we go. Yeah. And it's just the little things that are kind of interesting.
Like trying to get your was it the iTunes account or the iCloud?
Oh God, don't talk to me about that thing. Oh, I don't know why it's so broken, but it is. It probably took us about 3 hours to actually get all of the iTunes stuff that I needed sorted out to get fixed, and I still have Robert's name on one of my accounts for some reason. Like, nobody knows.
Trying to release a podcast is kind of difficult as well. Like, probably not quite the same but like just getting into Apple and then they've got to approve you, and for obvious reasons, but one thing I wanted to touch on as well is there's a lot of success around Mini Metro, and a lot of things have fallen into place, as well as a lot of hard work. I'm not at all discounting the hard work that went on, but surely there were some pretty big challenges that you guys faced as well. What were some of the biggest sort of hurdles was there anything that could have put a stop to it early in the piece?
Oh yeah, for sure.
I was horribly ill the day we did the game jam. The week of the game jam, I almost asked Rob to not show up on the second day. I was just, thankfully that didn't happen.
Well, really the biggest thing was taking it from the game jam into an actual Steam release. Pete, as you said, always had this kind of goal in mind, but I was sort of in a good job. I thought it was a bit, I was like, all this game stuff, so I'd been in the industry before, I'd been indie before, I was like, so that took about 6 months for that to sort of get sorted out, for us to come to the same place, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember showing you the emails and the
seeing how many were
after the
coming
green
in.
light campaign had just exploded, and I was like, because Rob was still very dismissive. It's like, you've only had like 14,000 votes on the game. That's only 14,000 people that said they might buy the game, and I was just showing the responses of your emails saying, oh my god, this game's good. And
I remember your updates, your like notifications were just coming in.
Yeah, that was
every few seconds there was an email or something. It was crazy.
Yeah, but it wasn't until after Indicate.
Yeah, that I was like, right, I have to really be completely on board here. So that was probably the biggest sort of danger zone that we ever had. I think from then on it was fine.
Yeah, actual development was reasonably straightforward. We had a few issues with the systems we'd added onto the Game Jam game to sort of to get it to the point where we felt it was a commercial release. You know, where we did feel ridiculous asking people to pay us for the game, but it went relatively smoothly in the game. Like if you play the Game Jam game, it's very simple. It looks pretty awful compared to the but it's very recognizable.
Ultimately, it's the same.
It shares a lot.
Yeah, it's just polished.
Yeah,
realistically.
A lot of and we've added a few things in, but ultimately it's the same.
It's no multiplayer though. We just have multiplayer.
That'll be in a week.
Every 3 weeks, there's one email or there's a tweet or something, which is
we thought about it, but it's not an obvious. There's an obvious design for multiplayer. There's a lot of different ways you could take it.
Leaderboards would be like the only kind of.
Yeah. I mean, we could integrate them more, but that's beside that. It's another.
But
But it would also be rebuilding the game from scratch.
Yeah.
Make no mistake, it's not happening. At least not with this version.
That sounds like an awesome fun. Let's do that.
Yep.
We touched on it a little bit before around the community. Obviously, I had it. You guys are members of the New Zealand Game Developers Association, but I mean, what's the community like here in Wellington or in New Zealand itself?
Yeah, it's really vibrant. I think in the last about 5 years, it's really exploded here. Just had a few indie successes and sort of studios starting up here as well. So we've had Woodshop Studio, which has begun in the last. When did they start up?
About 2 years, almost 2 years ago.
Right.
Well, they've been going for a lot longer, but Magic Leap has been going for, I think they're almost in 5 years now.
Yeah. Right.
But their New Zealand division only started a little while ago. I mean, James started out there when it was a little bit. There was less people there, and they sort of have done some pretty big growth in the last little while. So, I mean, most of them are still based out in the States and stuff like that.
But so they're at 24 employees now, I
I
think.
think they're a little bit more than that, but yeah, they've got a bunch of them right now, and so that's sort of been really helpful.
More than 3 in that bit.
Yeah.
And
there's
you're talking all of Magic Leap, they've got many people, but the New Zealand branch is somewhere around 25, I think, something like that.
There's Pickpock that's been going for 20 years, which is huge.
Yeah.
And they've got 80 to 100 staff.
80 to 100.
But they came off are they part of the
She
So-
evolved into Pickpock.
Yes, I think I was kind of trying to figure out like
If you
they're
never
the same
if you
group of
never
people.
worked for She Interactive and you had to every time you said where you worked or someone saw the name of the company, it's one of those names you always go to how to pronounce it.
Yes.
When I started there, it was like by the end of my first week, I sort of had a rough understanding of how to pronounce it.
Yeah, it's the Gaelic term for like a fairy, is it?
I think
right?
they could not get rid of that name and jump to Pickpock fast enough. I think they were so excited about finally having a pronounceable.
Well, and they made the switch because they were changing over from sort of more of a work for hire kind of console based and studio in order to go into something that's much more mobile. So basically everything they're doing right now is mobile. So
and
then there's also the Ashen team as well, which is about 25 or so.
That's pretty exciting. That's pretty cool. Like that's the
big budget kind of
game
Xbox
One.
It's Aurora 44
kind of thing.
Yes,
that's pretty exciting. So there's still games like that being made in New Zealand.
Yeah. And then we've got the automation team as well too, which I think they're around 10 people at this point now.
Yeah, they just keep on
getting
hiring
bigger.
as well.
Slowly but surely they keep growing.
It's really
so they're really cool. But I mean, our community is really cool because we've got a bunch of stuff that sort of happens around with it. I mean, we have like just meetups, so in most of the major cities in New Zealand, we'll have our own individual meetups where we bring in speakers, hopefully from a little bit farther afield than our home. But I mean, some people sort of do the tour and stuff like that. So we have those, which is great. We have something called Wellingtaru, which is basically it's referencing a thing called Otaru, which is in Tokyo, and then there's another one in Toronto called Tarantaro. Basically, it's where you get a bunch of devs together and you have beers and you chat. And sometimes you talk about game stuff and sometimes you don't, but it's just a place where you can sort of go relax with people that understand your struggle, which sounds ridiculous, but it's sort of a thing. We have game jams that run all through the year at this point, actually.
You've got a Wellington one?
Yeah, so I ran the global game jam Wellington last year and the year before, which was super cool. We had like 80 people at both of them, which is was way more than like twice as many people as we thought we were going to have. Good thing we had space for them. But they also have we have a Kiwi jam, which is actually a jam that runs all the way through. I think they try and hit all of the major cities that have studios and stuff in them, and so it's the same kind of thing as Global Game Jam, where everybody just gets together and they have a theme and they make games. And then we've got Pixel Jam, was actually one which is a competition, which is a different sort of format. So you're actually like, people will vote on your game afterwards, and whoever wins sort of gets a little bit of a prize and stuff like that. We've got a couple other little ones as well too, like Blue Jam, and it's neat. And then we have, what else do we have? Well, we've got Play-by-Play, which is pretty cool, which these guys started last year, and I'm helping along, which is great fun.
Yes, yeah.
You can talk more about that one than I can.
Yeah, so Play-by-Play was a festival that we started with a whole bunch of extra
it wasn't just us.
No.
Yeah,
all of
but
it.
Lucy Morris is the other big person that's involved in it last year.
Yeah, and so
Lucy's the main. I mean, she's no way it would exist without her. That's
It's sort of a brainchild.
Yeah, so it's a week-long festival of like NZ games. So we just basically hold an art exhibition of the games. Yeah, and we just wanted to sort of highlight the games that were made here, and sort of also educate kids about ways they can get into the industry, and that there is an industry here, so that they don't have to that they can get a job here in computer games.
Yeah.
And it's also a conference as well, and it's also the first NZ Video Game Awards.
Okay.
So
cool.
and that's been going really well. We had a very, very good first year, and now we're running it again April 17th to the 22nd this year. So in about 2 months?
Don't think about it.
Don't
think about it.
Hyperventilating and putting
yeah,
into a bag.
Oh my goodness, really 2 months.
Don't think about it.
I had no idea how much went on with these things, but oh my goodness, it's hard work.
It's always, with these sort of things, it always seems to be like, there's lots of people that help, there's always the few core people that do a lot of stuff, and then until you sort of are involved in something like that, or even in any organisation, these sort of things on a scale.
About 7 people on the team now, and it's still a lot of work. Yeah,
would be.
Lucy spends pretty much every evening, like she goes home after work and she just works on play-by-play stuff all night. It's just insane. It's
It's good, and I'm sure it's appreciated.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, we got heaps of really good feedback last year. It went down really, really well. So, and I mean,
and it was a wide audience as well too. The thing that was cool, we have things like Games Week, like Melbourne's Games Week, where we all go and we get to hang out with devs and stuff. But this is a lot more sort of outreaching, because the focus is a lot more just like people who are interested in games, not just people who already are making games. And so, I think last year there was a bunch of kids workshops and stuff like that as well too. And so the whole point is just sort of to foster games within New Zealand, and especially in Wellington, and just sort of build that up a whole bunch. So and there's NZGDC, which we haven't talked about either as well too, in terms of community stuff, which is the New Zealand Game Developers Conference. So that's the sort of more dev focused one that brings people from both just all places in New Zealand, and then a bunch from Australia as well to come down and visit. So it's pretty cool.
Because I think the Australian one's being run around PAX.
Yeah, usually it collides with it, so that you can do both.
I think we're going to go to PAX this year.
So.
Yeah, I was there for the first year last year with Mini Metro.
We want to go. Me and Eric and I want to go check it out.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's very different. I've been to PAX West as well too. And it's interesting getting to see how their own individual conferences while still being very linked. So it's neat.
All right, we won't keep you much longer. A couple of little things that, again, I'm interested in asking you a bit more sort of philosophical questions. Innovation in games, do you think that's going to come primarily from the indie dev scene?
I think naturally it always will. It's just because AAA's, their risk is so high that they really have to be guaranteed, or at least have a much higher guarantee of success. And I mean, you'll always get sort of small innovations inside that because I guess
You get your stuff work teams, right? Yeah.
It's easy to bash on AAA for rehashing the same things, blah blah blah. But I mean, they are incredibly talented teams, and they, as you said, they do. There are lots of innovations within the boundaries that they're sort of committed to.
Well, that's it. I mean, they're primarily governed by shareholders and things like that. So you've got to make money for people who hold shares in your company. So
and so like having to sort of argue for every small little thing, so people do, but it must be so much harder than just. I mean, indies, where you can spin up an entire game around one little small thing,
and you don't have anything to lose, right? Like that's where our game came from. It's just like, well, who cares? We're just going to make a game about a thing, and we'll see what happens.
We don't have $1 million investment behind us, and if we don't make that money back, then we're not.
And we didn't have any expectations. It's like we didn't. We weren't aiming to make a game that had to succeed. So it's like, let's just do this thing that we thought about.
It'd be fun.
So sort of naturally, I think you will tend to always get
the big innovations.
But I mean, you get loads of indie games that are completely uninspired and very much just ripping off. Basing themselves off existing successful games. I think in some respects you almost get more of that from the indie space. That kind of sort of hero worship almost.
By the volume of games that are produced in the indie space, I think, because there's so many more, the chances of having similar titles or similar games is going to be higher.
Yeah, so you probably get innovation and rehashing from both kind of styles, for sure. Yeah.
I think it also might depend on what the next sort of technology thing was. I mean, the last one that just sort of showed up that we're sort of cresting the end of was mobile, right? Like being able to play games on your phone and being able to play games that are good on your phone and, are breaking a whole bunch of boundaries is a thing. And so whatever this next is, which looks like it is sort of maybe VR related, but maybe not, or maybe MR or AR or whatever we want to go with that direction, whatever ends up sort of catching hold next is going to be the thing that's really probably going to be pushing a lot of that. And I don't know how far away that necessarily is. I mean, it could be like in 2 weeks, it could be like 10 years. And it's going to be interesting to sort of see what becomes the thing that keeps games interesting in that space in between. And it'll be cool to see who actually ends up sort of winning that race to a certain extent. Yeah,
that's a very good point, because also indies will tend to adopt that stuff faster because they don't have to. Again, it's just an interesting piece of tech. You just want to see what you can have it do, and so indies will usually sort of have the jump on the big guys by maybe a few years with that. Yeah, and we'll almost always have the first successes, and then kind of show to everyone else that this thing can actually work.
And then bigger titles, bigger publishers will book.
Virtual reality. I mean, indies certainly are jumping into that space. Yeah. But there are big companies still that obviously can see how this is going to, that it will be a big thing.
There's a Perth dev company, Stirfire, that made Symphony of the Machine, which is awesome. Like, it's a lot of VR games are focused on like fast-paced stuff or roller coasters, things like shootings and stuff like that. And this is like a puzzler kind of game, and it's a beautiful game and it looks amazing. But it kind of shows what an indie can do. Because they've been picked up, not by us, but for a while they've been working. The PlayStation store is going to sell them, basically. So they're going to be sold through PlayStation VR, which I think is a really good opportunity for them. And it kind of, like you said, shows what's possible with an indie dev. And maybe, that'll lead to other things being done by the bigger companies.
VR is definitely something that people are approaching with caution, though, because so far it's not exactly been financially viable if it's been a release that's been solely for VR.
There have been
the thing that's been
there have been a handful of games that have done very well, but good
Yeah,
luck.
someone did a whole bunch of projections or estimates on the revenue that the top selling VR games have made, and it's a lot. I mean, obviously, some of these have made a fair whack of cash that have probably repaid development costs and then some, but compared to non-VR games, like the top independent, ordinary games, so to speak, have made orders of magnitude more. So it's a very
it's
you
a
wouldn't.
risk.
Yeah, it would be a risk. But then again, developing is a risk anyway.
Yeah, but if you had to bet everything on a VR game or just a standard Steam, standard Steam release, not many people would take the punt on VR.
Again, but then you're selling to a smaller audience, but then you're going to catch, if you do have something that sticks out, it's probably easier to stick out at this point than in non-VR, and you're getting an audience that is prepared to pay a lot more per unit.
Yeah.
Your target audience is so much smaller as well.
It's just
because who's going to fork out $3,000 or whatever it is for VR? I would love to.
It must be 0.5% or something of the potential market on
Steam.
It's
I bought my rig and I'm like, oh yeah, sweet, it's VR compatible. Let's have a look at how much it is. Nope.
It's going to be interesting to see how mobile VR ends up sort of coming, or whether or not it ends up being the bridge in the meantime, because we've got like Daydream coming out, which has a little bit more interactivity than some games that we've got, or some systems that we've got. I mean, we do have like Gear VR, but it's very restricted to people who have a very particular sort of phone, and so Daydream might actually be able to open that up a little bit, as long as you actually have controls that are sort of compatible with what they offer. And so it means some of the big budget stuff will go out, but maybe some of the small budget might actually be able to thrive in that community, because people, like, it's supposed to be affordable, right? Like, the whole point is that they can get it into people's houses. So it'll be interesting to see how they manage to, whether that actually manages.
Daydream definitely is the most compelling VR platform for me. It seems like it's going to bridge the gap between affordability and the experience being reasonably high quality.
Yeah, because you've already got the phone, you just need however much it is to buy the controller, as opposed to a very up-to-date PC and then another 15. Well, here it's like 1,800 or something to get the vibe, or the. It's either that or it's a lot more cost-effective to get a PSVR.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you don't need the beefy computer that goes with the Vive.
I don't have one, but I mean a PlayStation.
But even if you do, it costs you like less to buy a PSVR and a PlayStation than it does to just buy the Vive, and you still have to get the computer, get the high performance computer, which will probably cost more than the Vive itself.
Until those prices come down, that's the place we're going to be in, and so I think that's sort of what people are kind of waiting for as well too. So there sort of seems to be this maybe sweet spot of when to actually like plan and release a game, is that we're waiting for the technology to catch up a little bit more before we can actually sort of in good conscience be able to produce a VR game that we feel like we can actually
right now most studios are looking right now most studios are kind of looking at VR now as a way to sort of upskill for when it's actually a thing that is big. But I guess we'll see what happens in the next few years.
Last question. What's next for you guys?
Well, we're expanding. So we'll likely be a bit bigger by this time next year. And we are still working on updates for Mini Metro. We'll be probably doing that until it doesn't make sense not to. So at least another year we'll be doing it.
Hopefully longer.
And we're working on a pitch for the New Zealand Film Commission's Interactive Development Fund. So that's their first time that the New Zealand government has been funding game development. So we're actually recording the video pitch this afternoon.
You'll be sick of talking by this afternoon then.
I just want to go.
And that's going to be a narrative puzzle game.
Ooh. So we'll be submitting that at the end of the week and see how that goes. See if the government wants to give us some money to make that.
I wish we really need to bring ours back in Australia.
Well, this is sort of a breakthrough one. Like, this is the first time that they've actually had any kind of money from the government being able to go. So it's sort of this pilot program where like a bunch of devs are trying to help support and be like, look, we can produce good content. And I mean, it's open up to film and interactive things. Like it's a bigger, like it's bigger than just in games.
Because obviously the film industry here is big.
Yeah.
It's quite big. So it's sort of coming from that angle as well. It's sort of looking at getting film-oriented places to do interactivity as well as games to tell stories.
Well, that's it. It's a storytelling medium. So
big
it's
time.
an art medium. So
the interesting bit has been sort of showing them that you can, or reminding them, I guess, in a way that you can build stories in ways that aren't blatantly using dialogue and or written story. Like you played Journey, right? Like there's no words in that, but man, there's one heck of a narrative that's in there, right? Like they've managed to be able to sort of show you with without question that there's definitely a way that you can bring people on this lovely journey. No pun intended.
And this fund has been a result of the NZ Game Developers Association talking with the government for a very long time about how the industry is going, and that New Zealand actually has a good industry, but it could be bigger.
A much bigger industry,
and just the ways that the government could potentially help the industry.
I mean, like you said earlier, Canada has got a couple of programs, I think, around. Great Britain has one as well. Yeah, Great Britain's
pretty good at funding it.
I don't know what's in the US, but like when we had a paper released back in 2016, start of 2016, around the game industry. One of our senators put it forward, and about what we want, how we can improve the Australian game industry and what we should do. And I mean, apparently it's one of the 2,000 papers that hasn't even been reviewed yet. So
you kind of need to. You kind of need to be able to sort of, one of the things that the NZGDA does really well and has been sort of making a push for in the last, 5 years is they've been sort of trying to make the conversations and make connections with people and sort of show them what we actually do. It's like we're not just a bunch of nerds that are hanging out, plunking away at our computers making something that is made for kids, right? Because there's such a stigma around it for people who don't actually play games, that video games are for children, and the people who play them are small, there's not a huge number of them, and they're not really, it's not a big thing.
Adult who plays computer games, then oh my god,
so trying to break away that stigma for people who haven't actually been introduced to games is one of the big things they have to do. It's literally $1 billion market to make it small, right? And it's one of those things that it really is worth the time, and I mean it's an export as well too, right? You don't actually think about it, but as soon as we finish making a product, it is worldwide export, and so you're bringing in money from everywhere.
So, unless you try to, we definitely do.
Yeah, so we're 98% export. We don't pay any, shipping or distribution costs or anything like that.
That's exactly it. Especially in Australia, the mining boom has ended, right? And over here, you guys seeing how much tourism drives your economy in New Zealand. And then just seeing Australia's tourism industry is okay, but mining's finished. Really, at the moment, it's picking back up a little bit, but
it's not going to be a long term.
Yeah, it's a cyclical industry, and export, live analytics export is the other thing we kind of do, but there's a space there, I think, for Australia and New Zealand to really have this as a digital media sort of export and make a decent industry out of it. All right, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to chat with me and hopefully people listening to the podcast.
No problem.
And I really enjoyed it. And
cool, no problem. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to our podcast. All our information can be found on our website, www.AussieDevs.com. And if anyone's keen to come on the show and chat about anything they're doing or have any comments or queries on our podcast, please hit us up at our Twitter account, which is @AussieDevs.